continuity, it requires good technical ability to do those things. There's also the problem of turning the conclusions of research into practical recommendations. And the simple thing to say is the one here, which is what I used to say all those years ago. A research farm is not the same as a real farm. Usually, if you are doing it on a research farm, you don't want anything to interfere with your statistics. You want absolutely clear that the plot is exactly the same in one year and it's exactly the same in another year or another part of the as near nothing as possible. As near nothing. It's actually that's a revolutionary statement, isn't it? The only statement that I can think of as more revolutionary would be to say that the hoe has a place in modern agriculture. Yeah, the hoe has a place in modern agriculture. And if you live on Kilimanjaro, you know what I mean. If you live in Sakuna, you probably not. So modern agriculture is not rejecting the hoe necessarily. It may at some places, which is a better alternative. But as near nothing as possible. Most interventions are probably costing money and not achieving very much. As near nothing as possible. If in doubt, don't know it. As I say, tell that to a regional commissioner, they find it very hard to believe. If you're a people person, and you believe in people, well, you have faith in people to make their own decisions. I don't mind which you can do it, that's a left-wing one, the first one is a right-wing one. They can be either. Either way, don't intervene unless you're sure it's going to make a difference. Intervene to make markets work better. In particular, to make sure farmers get the value of their crops. They don't get taken away from them by inefficiencies or reductions or anything else. Undertake relevant research, including relevant socio-economic research, including monitoring and evaluation and implementation. A lot yes, a lot of, but these are basic. These are mostly national level, so locally, it's probably the top two that matter. Okay, so conclusions now. Just trying to bring this to a conclusion. I think the timing of Kilimo Kwanza was good. There was an urgent need to make Kilimo first, if you like, give a boost to it. It had been neglected, it was important, it was announced. Surprising it was neglected, but given that it was, we should bring it back in, and therefore it's a good time. Okay. The easiest way, or certainly a very possible way, potentially to increase the output and export is from short farms. We should drop this distinction between food and cash crops. That will also lessen rural poverty. Large-scale farming has a role. It can lead the way in certain circumstances, it can provide a base in certain circumstances. Outgrowth schemes are an attempt to get the best of both worlds, which can be put in certain circumstances, but not automatically. The role of the state is to provide the conditions for this to happen to keep its own costs down. And I want to finish with a very interesting debate. It's a debate between two slightly arrogant Western experts. Vince Wang, you all made your own mind up, and those of you who've met him here. Paul Collier, some of you probably also know, because he's actually, I'm not sure whether he's been here, but I think he must have been here personally, but he had a project here that was running in an office in the Bank of Tanzania until quite recently. I think he probably has been in Tanzania, but he certainly, his team have been in Tanzania. And I'm just going to pick it from Paul Collier's point of view. He's written a book. Most of the Plundered Planet is about mining and oil contracts and difficulties that countries like Nigeria got into with getting all the income from oil and not knowing what to do, misusing it really in all sorts of ways. And a lot of it is about how you make contracts when you don't have good information, when the other side know more than you do. You are ignorant and they have a lot of knowledge. So if you're dealing with an oil company, you're a national government, the oil company knows much more about oil than you do. And a lot of his advice on that is actually highly relevant, and I would say anybody in Tanzania should read it to be stimulated and given some thoughts. Obviously, many of the big contentious issues at the moment would be much better if they followed some of that advice, something about doubting, firm atmosphere, really searching. Now, let me just, these things are actually quotes from Paul Collier's chapter on agriculture. Now his chapter on agriculture I think is terrible. I mean, stuff on minerals is quite interesting, stuff on agriculture is not. It doesn't come until page 216 or something like that. He doesn't start with agriculture. He starts with all these other things, and agriculture comes in at the end. And a lot of it is about big companies, agribusiness, coming in and so on. And these are the sort of things that the return to antiquated technologies cannot feed a prospective world population of 9 billion. Antiquated technologies mean small. The future populations will not live on quaint little farms within the slums of coastal megacities. And they won't live in the hinterland of Tanzania, they'll live in Dar es Salaam. They will not grow their own food, but buy it, and they will buy it at lower prices. The first giant that must be slain is the middle class love affair with peasant agriculture. The peasant life forces millions of ordinary people into the role of entrepreneur, for which they most are ill suited. Interesting things. Actually, when you read it more closely, he's not addressing Africa. He's addressing a European audience when he says that. And he keeps picking on keeps bringing out Prince Charles. Now, Prince Charles is the Queen's son in England.
He's not middle class, though, is he? He's not middle class, Prince Charles.
But what Prince Charles would like, he'd like people in England to give up living in cities and go back to villages and start digging and growing their own potatoes and their fruits and living on the farm. So he has a model of a rural escapism to go away from cities, and Collier is attacking that. And of course he's perfectly right, but lost sight of that. Does that mean actually, does that mean I've done something wrong? Power's gone or something? Just leave it. We've almost finished. So Collier is really but he hasn't thought about the issues of rural development, the numbers of people, the involvement of whole families, and the potential. He just hasn't understood it. Interesting thing is that in his book, Collier says that he was summoned to FAO in Rome to have a debate with Binswanger. Okay, so the two of them they were brought in because one was supporting large farms, the other small farms. So he actually, in his book, he describes the debate with Binswanger. If you believe this, I don't know whether he cleared it with Binswanger before he put it in the book, because if I was Binswanger, I wouldn't be very happy with this, what is in the book, because it makes Binswanger out to look like an idiot. But basically, they have this debate, and Collier said that his model of what Walmart in the States, or big supermarkets, because they can buy everything in big bulk and push the prices down and provide a few points of mass out, and it's a very cheap. And Binswanger was saying his model was something like the informal sector, of small scale competing with large scale, and so Collier tries to rubbish that in his book to make out it's very practical. But he does say after their debate, after his debate with Binswanger, he concluded that outgrowers may be more efficient than wage employment. Interesting, because that's an interesting story. So he conceded there might be a role, just might be a role for outgrowers. Many family farms will be viable. They will take over the holdings of their neighbours whose children leave for the cities. Right? So he has this model of people leaving for the cities and then and then other people taking over the farm. So a form of consolidation. And you can imagine, well, it's interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting model. I mean, there are some issues about plot size in Tanzania and inheritance and so on. But is it really going to be like that? We actually get people taking over their neighbours and getting, I don't know, maybe. Right. I think that's probably more than enough. I think I'll stop there. I hope I've stimulated you a little bit on certain issues. I think there is potential. I think much could be done. Let's not get carried away. Let's also recognise the politics underlying it, the commercial interest underlying it, and so on.
So, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Actually, there are so many new insights that have come up. I'll just make a quick recap. We have been told that the economy of Tanzania is one of the fastest growing economies of the world, but this is true for those who are slaves of numbers. Whether developing countries should push for small or large scale farms is a century-old debate. Under good arrangement, small farms can be as competitive as large-scale farms. And a good example is China, where the majority of farmers are small-scale farmers and the productivity is high. Also, it says that there should be no distinction between food crops and cash crops, because such classification was a colonial concept. And it says actually Tanzania should be pushing for export of food crops instead of traditional export crops. Also, it says Kilimo Kwanza was promoted by those who were in favor of large-scale farms. And also that Kilimo Kwanza cannot succeed in transforming rural communities if treated in isolation. He said that it should be part of a broader community development program. And he concludes by saying that Kilimo Kwanza is a primary initiative. Thank you very much. And now I open the floor for comments and contribution.
I have two points to make, especially with regards to your slide on role of state. I feel there are two areas that I felt is missing in that slide, especially if you look at from a provision of public goods angle. Hence, I think that is a major role that the Tanzanian government can play in irrigation, especially in building reservoirs. Assuming that I don't know much about the rainfall, but assuming that given the facts here, if there are a lot of water resources, and assuming that there is a lot of rainfall, that irrigation system can go ahead. I can remember there is a history in Sri Lanka, where I come from. One of our kings those days, hundreds of years ago, has told the country should not let a single drop of water going back to the sea. And now everywhere in the country has reservoirs. Of course, now we have a problem because of these southern hemisphere problems. A lot of rain and a lot of floods because all these reservoirs are overflowing in the entire country. Now, my second question is, going back to again the agricultural productivity you mentioned. Now, productivity remains more or less the same. Production itself remains the same. Not production, growth. On average, say